Okay, now go, Garrett.
Awesome. So this is the time I do a couple different tech checks. First, that it says I'm sharing my screen, but can you all see my screen right now? You should see a
We
big old
can.
PowerPointy looking image. Great. And I'm hearing nods and things like that as I speak, which means that I'm assuming that I'm also relatively audible right now. That's right?
Yep, good
Awesome.
sound.
And goodness gracious, I like the closed captions. Sometimes I have a tendency when I'm excited, which I am going to get in this session, to talk pretty quickly, and I'll try to moderate that and enunciate, but you are not being rude at any point. If you're like, Garrett, slow down or repeat what you said, or quite frankly, if you ask for anything that you need in the space. So just a real joy to be with you all and to talk organizing, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. And before I get going, I want to maybe just level set a little bit on, I do versions of this training for lots of different groups, but and in a lot of different space. And usually when I run this training, it's for people who aren't necessarily in a shared context. And so it's a real gift on my part tonight to be with a group of people who are working towards a common goal. It is a common goal that I believe in so deeply. And I'm just quite frankly honored to get to be a little part of your story and to be connected to your story, because anything I can do as somebody who is not a Washingtonian, but loves so many Washingtonians and wants also your state to be an example for the rest of us in terms of universal health care. Anything I can do to help matters a lot to me. And I want to just name tonight that we're going to be talking and parsing through organizing in different contexts over the course of the evening. But when I think about you all, and you can correct me if this feels wrong, I think about organizing in two ways. I think both about the organizing you will do to get signatures on ballots, to get signatures on petitions, right? So actually going out into communities at doors, at community events, outside businesses, et cetera, and getting those signatures and the conversations that require that. I am thinking about that element, right? And interface often with strangers, right? I'm also thinking about organizing in the internal work you all do as volunteers to build volunteer bases around you, right? To sustain local groups in your communities who are doing this work, to bring more people into the work, not just of signing the petition, but also in being whole Washington organizers themselves and being a part of a community. So that's how I'm thinking about organizing and the task at hand for you all going into this. Did I say anything? Was that out of pocket, or did it also miss a key element of context that I should also hold top of mind for you all tonight?
I think that's great, Garrett. There's a lot of work we're doing over here. I think you captured very valid points in that introduction.
Awesome. So, and I think both of those, if I haven't messed up so far, which is an amazing news, then I think both of those are really, really critical tasks in and of themselves. And both of them create their own organizing challenge. It is hard. It is hard to get signatures on a petition, as you guys can tell me, like from personal experience. But it is also hard, in fact, even harder, to get like-minded people who are down for your cause, who want to be part of the efforts, but who have busy lives, who have lots of things that take them away from being more active organizers, from showing up again and again, and from sustaining community with each other. And both are really, really crucial tasks. So that I'm thinking about this, know that as I'm thinking about organizing, that's going to be what's top of mind for me as I connect with you all. And I want to begin tonight. This is obviously, we're doing a 2-hour session on organizing. It's not going to be comprehensive, but if I'm lucky, I've given you all kind of like an intriguingly tasty appetizer of some broader organizing context. And I think I'll begin that with a little bit of storytelling before we go into our first opening question with each other. If I think about the spirit, I've been lucky to get to study organizing both from the past greats and from people who are doing really incredible work present tense. That's what I do all day, studying the lessons from great organizers. And if I were to really coalesce them into 3 major points, I would say organizing is about believing, building, and belonging. And when I say believing, I mean believing that your neighbors are capable of acting politically in a way that they have not yet shown a capability. That can both mean becoming more active volunteers in your efforts or signing on for a request to care for the common good in your state. But it's actually about the core act of saying, even though we haven't seen that evidence yet, in fact, we've seen stalls in progress towards the kind of Washington that we dream of in the past, that we believe that our neighbors are capable, if brought in the right way, of showing us something surprising. The belonging piece, as I hinted at in the last piece, is caring a lot about when you are doing organizing work with other people, caring about the shared experience of it, caring about the people in the room with you, what they can bring, what they need, and about caring about their sustainability as much as you care about the end goal of your campaign. But that organizing is not just about believing in building towards their own ends, making people feel good. It is about building, about showcasing a group that even though they feel isolated, feel alone, that in fact that they have more power and that you all have more power together than you might imagine. And you're probably wondering what this image is. And it's an image that Lindsay first saw in one of my first Barn Raisers trainings, but it's one of my favorite organizing pictures ever. And I think that it epitomizes a group that was really good at believing, belonging, and building. And if you're seeing the little farm workers logo that one guy's wearing, you're guessing correctly that this is from the Central California farm workers movement marches of the 1960s, Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez. And if it also looks like these are people doing a wacky theater scene, you are correct. So the backstory here is that during the farm workers movement, the workers used to do theater just to entertain themselves on the long marches, right? They were boring. They were literal long marches through the Central Valley. And so they would do these funny skits where they would make fun of the bosses or make fun of the cops or make fun of the union organizers. And they were doing it just for entertainment purposes. But the labor leaders or the organizers at that same time had this huge dilemma, right? Like they believed in the power, they thought they fully believed in the power of the workers they had brought together, and they were really trying to build leadership potential in the workers. They kept like running all these leadership development trainings, trying to get their workers to show up and sign up for volunteer leadership positions. Like they were really trying to get more active stuff out of their people, right? And they were failing. That like the workers were not responding well to the training, and they were not raising their hands for union leadership positions. And the farm workers organizers were puzzled by this. But as they started noticing more carefully, they did notice one trend of a set of workers who were likely to volunteer for union leadership position. And it was workers who had repeatedly in these silly little skits gotten to play people with hierarchical power in society, who they had played the bosses or they had played the union leaders. Those workers were likely to show for volunteers. And when they realized this, they connected with the work that Paulo Freire had done in Brazil with popular education and this idea of teatros campesinos, of workers' theater, and they realized, oh, duh, we've been doing this all wrong. We were still thinking that our workers had this deficit, that if only we taught them the skills on how to be leaders, that then they would show all this leadership potential. But the leadership potential was already in them. It was just that society had given them all this internalized junk, in particular, from a class perspective and from a racial perspective, saying you don't have a voice. So these silly skits, as simple as they were a safe place to practice having a leadership voice, even if it was a pantomimed one that otherwise they weren't given. And at that point, the union organizers realized we hadn't really believed in our people, and we hadn't really created enough spaces of belonging that our people didn't need to have lectures laid at them. What they really needed was a space where that was safe enough and creative enough, where a part of them that had kind of been tamped down by society could now effectively come out. So they scrapped their old leadership training model and instead did skits did this whole theater program as their leadership development model. And that's how they built a next generation of union leaders. And that was how they sustained their efforts over a long term. And so that idea that we as organizers are not trying to drill something into other people who are wrong, who believe the wrong things, or aren't showing up for our stuff because they're lazy or they don't care or they're apathetic, but thinking that our neighbors and our fellow organizers already are the people we want to be together, that we are already the best version of ourselves, the most creative, the most connective, the most caring, the most tenacious, etc. But it's our space together, our conversations, our shared community that's going to bring out the best if it's a safe enough space. It's not anything that we have to teach each other. So that's your vignette on organizing before we fully get into it. And to give a hint of where we're going to be going the rest of the evening, we are in this first section, giving kind of an intro to organizing, and we're going to pause for a little time together to get to know each other, and then go back into kind of some inspiration from great organizers. Then we're going to have this middle section, which I'm scientifically calling, what do you do in a conversation with another person if you're not allowed to yell with them? It is about why most methods of persuasion don't work and perhaps some other things that will work. And finally, I'm going to leave you with a few kind of models of inspiration from other similar groups across the country, some smaller than yours, some larger than yours, that I think really epitomizes some of the best of all this. So before I go, and I should note that we're going to be doing some full group discussion. We might be later on be doing a little small group discussion potentially. And we're also going to be using the chat function quite a bit. So typing into the chat. So obviously, if you're not in a place to be able to type or talk, we understand. We'll still so lucky to have you here. But if you are in a place to either use the chat when we need to, and I'll walk you through how we're going to do that, or if you're able to talk out loud, that's going to be super, super helpful. Are there any questions or concerns before or just anything folks need to put into the space before I move us forward?
Just really appreciate the approach, Garrett. This is Carrie, current board chair, but honestly, my first volunteer experience was gathering 7 signatures from folks in my house.
Oh, wow.
And just that thought of like, we are the people we need to be to do this. Like, we're all just volunteers. We need to be able to make decisions and know where we're going without running everything through Andre or running everything through Carrie. And I just really appreciate the focus on small leaders. It's great. Loving it so far. Thank you.
Oh, appreciate you. Thank you. So what we're going to do next, and you'll see that I said in small groups, but I think we're at a size where it's not going to be too annoying to just do it full group. I know you probably all have better context for each other than I do, so apologies. I'm the real stranger here. I also apologize that there are 2 types of facilitators in the world. There are icebreaker facilitators and there are non-icebreaker facilitators. You are big time stuck with an icebreaker facilitator. I am sorry, but I'm going to try to make it fun. And I think this is one of my favorite ones for a group that I don't know and perhaps that doesn't know all of each other potentially. But here's what we're going to do. And again, for all that you know some of this for each other already, my apologies for making you do it for the stranger, but I'd love in a second for us to go around and I'll call on folks. I'm going to try to do it based on alphabetical order, but if I mess up the chat and go in the wrong order, let me know, give me trouble. So we're going to go around and say our name, pronouns, where we are calling in from tonight, where we're living, and my favorite of all, I love making strangers do this with each other. What is something extremely specific that you are so good at, but hopefully that like something that you don't get to brag about enough? And this does not have to be consequential for the world. This can be a silly, non-consequential task. You can be secretly really, really good at balancing things on your nose. I don't care what it is. Or it could be very consequential. Perhaps you are the best gardener in your community and we should know about it. The only rule is you are not allowed to give any caveats. You can't be like, my raspberry jam is pretty good, but you know, there's a lot of good jam makers out there. Just be like, no, I am the best raspberry jam maker, second to none. There we go. So I am going to model this for us before taking us off the Zoom or taking us the screen off so we can all see each other easily. I left the iStock image watermark on this picture of millennials enjoying brunch together because I thought it was funnier that way. I think I was correct about this. My name is Garrett. My pronouns are he, him. I'm calling in tonight from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I live. And I am a white person from the upper Midwest, which means that I live in the land of passive aggression and of people who are terrible as a group at deciding where to go to dinner with each other. Like there's a whole lot of like, oh, you pick, I don't care, oh, whatever's good. And an hour into it, you haven't decided, and it's only then that you learn that somebody has a gluten allergy. Like I am really, really good at within 5 minutes learning about dietary restrictions, presenting to a group 3 clear choice point ideas, then playing a game of skill and chance, often throwing things into hats to like find a winner. If we have any big vetoes, great, we're all set with number 2 option. If not, we are off to number 1. We are laughing, we are moving, we have made a decision very quickly on where to go to dinner, and we're feeling great about it. I am so good at this that I have not tested if this decision-making method works in other contexts. I haven't like used it to like help couples plan their wedding or anything. I just do the dinner thing because you know what? I am going out on top with this skill, but I am really, really good at it. So with that, that was mine. And again, I think that I'm looking at looking at alphabetical order. Lindsay, you're not first, but I'm going to have you go first because I know you best and I can be mean to you. And then we're going to go
Okay.
Catherine. And is it Carrie who's under the whole Washington name right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Lindsay, Catherine, Carrie are going to go in the first order. Lindsay, start us up.
Okay, I'm Lindsay Sheehan. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Castle Rock, Washington, as I mentioned, and I am very good at air hockey.
Oh, do you have like a really good method?
It's just like crazy and intense. I just like move my arm really fast and it seems to work. So that's my technique.
Awesome.
Also very competitive, so that helps.
Laura, welcome. You are right in the middle of introductions. I'm not going to have you go for a little while, but it's going to be name, pronouns, where you are living, and I'm making people brag about a specific skill they are really, really good at. And we just found out Lindsay is an air hockey master. So, and with that, let's go to Catherine.
Catherine Landowski. Sorry, Catherine Landowski. I'm from Arlington, Washington. My pronouns are she, we, us. And oh, what am I good at that I don't brag about enough? I don't brag enough. I don't think I do. I'm really good about standing by the underdog and fighting for the underdog. I don't know why. That's what I've always been good at. And that's always what drew me to standing up when my friend, not even a close friend, but a friend on the school bus was getting beat up, to, you know, to defend her, to fighting for people in my union, to now fighting for universal health care. I fight for the underdog. And I sometimes, that's my purpose.
Love it so much. And I love you, no caveats there. You just stuck with the brag too. And we're so lucky for it. Let's go to Carrie.
Sure. My name is Carrie Wallace. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Castle Rock. I think Lindsay mentioned that earlier. It's in Southwest Washington, Cowlitz, Indian land, and specific skill. I'm really good at recognizing patterns and like putting things together, making connections with content. Yeah.
Ooh. Is that both like in terms of information? Are you also good at visual patterns and things like that?
Information. I'm not good at creating visuals, no, but
Okay. Let's stick
for
with
my own self in my
Yeah.
own head.
That's right.
Yes.
Awesome. Let's go. We're going to go to Kathy, Laura, and Martha in order next. Kathy, you are up.
Okay, my name's Kathy, and pronouns are she, her. What was the third one? Oh, I
Oh,
live
where you live.
I live in Seattle.
Right.
And I'm really good at organizing parties and celebrations, which is, it's fun, just getting people together.
Ooh, and like when you say like is there any age group you're particularly good at? Like you're particularly good at a kid party or a retire, like a graduation, or all the above?
I did a lot, mostly at work.
Yeah.
So, and the whole span from young to old and all that. But no, I haven't done too many kids
That's cool.
gatherings.
Well, an opportunity for the future.
That's right.
Laura, welcome.
Oh, she hasn't unmuted.
I think you're muted, Laura.
I didn't get a link for this. That's why I'm late. I just got a reminder link and I go, oh, wow, I thought it was until 7. So sorry to be rude. My name's Laura Bracken. I live on Lummi Island, and I was a mathematics instructor at a college for 25 years. I'm good at spreadsheets. I'm good at doing budgets and all that sort of stuff. I'm a volunteer grant writer for an organization, been pretty successful at that. But I think my greatest strength is I worked for Reclaim Idaho to pass expansion of Medicare. And it was so out of my comfort zone, and being a progressive and living on a street with a whole ton of Trump flags and going door to door and asking them to sign that petition. It was horrid. But I'll tell you what happened was this guy that was organizing the whole thing. I mean, he'd be like the whole thing from Sandpoint. He came down to where I lived and walked around with us and helped us do it. And once I'd done it with one other person, it became so much easier. I have to tell you, I was so proud when that thing passed.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was just going door to door and saying, do you have anybody you know that doesn't have health insurance? And then saying, this could make a difference for them. And these are really conservative Trump voters, and they signed on because they knew that it would make a difference. So I guess my biggest strength is I have hope for things like this, even though they seem like it's just impossible. It can happen in Idaho. Hello, it can happen in Washington.
Yes.
So I was excited, Laura, when you said spreadsheets, because I'm terrible at them. So I was just excited someone was good at them. But then you really had me at Reclaim Idaho, which I'm going to mention multiple times through this training. I just love everything everyone who's ever been involved in that has done. Was that Luke who came down, or was it?
It was. And Luke Mayville, I mean, he's just a dude that had a degree from Yale and decided that when he moved to Sandpoint, he's going to make a difference. And he and his wife, I mean, they sacrificed a ton. And there was another guy, Garret, I think.
Yep.
Who was going to medical school at the time. And,
yes.
And just put his whole self out on the line to make that happen. It was very inspirational for a lot of people. And, you know, I didn't do as much as some people did, but it took a ton of people willing to spend a weekend, just a weekend.
Yeah.
So like, I know I can sit at the farmer's market on Lummi Island and fill pages of petition sheets.
100%. Oh, this is, Laura, I want to just end the training on that. That's everything I need. We're set, but our strengths do not all have to be organizing based, even though that was so awesome. And we're going to keep on, they can be air hockey based as well. And I'm going to keep on moving to Martha. Martha, so good to have you.
Hi, I'm Martha Menard. I live in Blaine, Washington, which is very close to Lummi Island.
It
and
is.
the border with Canada. My pronouns are she and her. Let's see. Specific skill that I'm really, really good at. I'm really, really good at critically evaluating research and designing research studies. And I'm also very comfortable with spreadsheets.
Ooh, that's like I would not even know where to start in designing a research study. I assume this is something you have an actual degree in, or is this
I do.
self-taught as well?
I'm a research methodologist by training. Have a PhD in that.
Nice.
And statistics counted as my foreign language requirement.
Yes.
Oh, muy bien. Okay. Let's go to Pam.
That is hilarious. That is wonderful. Okay, Pam Ketzner. I am oh, she, her pronouns, Tacoma, Washington. And I am pretty good, and I will brag about this, of having about 2 degrees separation from everyone. I can be at meetings with hundreds and hundreds of people and pretty much sure that I will meet somebody that is from Vermont, where I grew up, or Kansas, where I went to school.
I was going to ask if this has to do with like having lived across the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, an incredible, I mean, it's just like that. And being a visiting nurse, I could walk into someone's house and talk about almost anything on their walls. Because I just love knowing things or learning things about people. So
I love it.
it's a pretty cool thing. Some people have actually observed that that are on this call.
That you've walked in their house and gone, nice.
No, just running into people that
Yeah,
somehow I have a connection.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And Peace, I saw that you put some answers in the chat. Did you also want to say out loud, or did you want us to enjoy them in the chat?
I think P said earlier that they're in a place where they can't talk.
Awesome. Great. So if folks can't see the chat, Peace uses they, them pronouns, lives in unincorporated, I hope I'm saying Skagit County, rural. Skagit, thank you.
Almost there.
And is incredible. Loves teaching games and is also an incredible euchre partner, which I want someone, this is useful for me. I live in the upper Midwest and I don't know how to play euchre. I do very much need a euchre teacher. So Peace, hell yeah. And if you want to just be posting in the chat euchre instructions, I will save it and take advantage of it. But let's go to Sarah. Oh, what is euchre? It's a card game. I'll leave it there, and Peace can probably give a better explanation. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah, she, her pronouns. I'm a military kid, but I've lived in Seattle for 15 years now. So I guess I can say I'm from Seattle now. And I got a New York Times digital subscription last year, and I'm pretty good at Wordle now. So that's my thing.
Do you have a go-to starter word? Or do you mix it up?
You know, my son, I got my 8-year-old really into it too. And so he's constantly coming up with words, and he uses radio. So I've been using that one. So yeah.
And Zoe, who is schooling me on starter words being obsolete, Zoe, you get to bring up. It's your turn.
Hang on 1 second. Let me get going here.
Great.
Okay. Hi. My name is Zoe. I'm she, her. I live in Seattle. I'm originally from Idaho, so that's a very interesting story. We are over there still, surprisingly. We're just hard to find amongst the sea of red. And I'm really good at talking to strangers.
Wow.
So that's one of the reasons that I saw this, and I'm also I can't remember your name, visiting nurse, but I have 1 year of nursing school left. And so I feel like I'll have access to a lot of people that would be interested in signing this petition through school. And also I work as a massage therapist right now. And I have a lot of clients that are probably really interested in signing this petition. And so I want to learn how to do it.
Awesome. So perhaps those of you who know each other already knew those strengths. I don't think every single person on this call knows every single person on this call, though. And I also don't think everyone who might know even some knew all those strengths, right? So we just had a silly, very wacky little exercise, which I should pause and say, did I skip anybody or did I get to everybody? Awesome. That in this silly little exercise, right, we heard so many things that are skill sets directly applicable and useful to the campaign, right? And also skill sets that you're probably like, that sounds like a delightful person that I want to spend hardworking time with. And both of those things are true about any random group that would gather together and are also really, really important to know, and the kind of things that we don't discover if we just always jump into, okay, what is agenda item 3, 4, 5, when is the next election cycle? When do we start needing to get petitions out, et cetera? And so even though not fully the purpose of it, you can still see echoes of this kind of believing, belonging, and building approach towards organizing, even just in that little intro there. What I want to do next, though, and this is going to be the part of the session where we are using the chat function the most. I want to get a little deeper in this concept of what organizing is and what organizing isn't. And the way we're going to do that is I've got a few quotes from a set of organizers that both contemporary and from the past that really, really inspire me. And we're going to do two things with them. The first is we'll get a chance to talk about just what's inspiring about these quotes. And then we're going to talk about what's challenging about living up to these quotes, in particular when we are working with community with and in communities that have some form of privilege, right? Majority white communities often when we're working, or communities with other forms of privilege or other forms of perhaps denial of privilege, conservative places, et cetera, right? So we're going to do both sides, both what's challenging about them, but we're going to start with what's really inspiring and what kind of jazzes us about this approach to organizing. And the reason why I want to do this off the jump is because I think the term organizing is one that often gets utilized synonymously with a lot of other terms that we say activism and organizing at the same time, or mobilizing, or being political, or whatever, right? There are lots of ways to be political. There is making Facebook posts. There is complaining about something to our best friend. There is voting. There is not voting. There is going to a school board meeting. There is ignoring the school board meeting. There is reading the paper and writing fervent letters to the op-ed page. There is, taking petitions around. There is get out the vote campaigns in districts that we know are friendly to our cause, right? A lot of those things are really, really good. And a lot of those things can potentially be done with an organizing mindset, but can potentially be done without an organizing mindset. And hopefully these next quotes will get us a little bit more into what it means to do them with an organizing mindset. The great news about this is everything we're going to be talking about in this organizing mindset is really, really easy. And by that I actually do mean that like there's no skill of great organizing. And I think Laura really like named it really well. Like organizing is just being curious enough about your neighbors that you ask them questions. Organizing is just like putting on your shoes or picking up your phone and actually doing it. That is the bad news about it too. That like there's no deep skill set that like yes, there's some trainings we can get better at. There's people who are particularly skilled at it, but there's no deep skill to unlock that makes it less scary. And that's the bad news too. And Laura, I also heard that in your statement too. Like it was scary to go to your conservative neighbors and go do it. But the actual act of doing so wasn't mechanically necessarily like, that wasn't the trick. The trick is, it is hard to, there's lots of reasons why we put up barriers to connection with each other, and especially in our current world. So the bad news is I don't have any like secret thing that is the like, once you unlock this gate, organizing will make sense to you. It's all intuitive stuff. And core to the intuitive stuff is you kind of have to do it, which is both the good news and bad news of it. So with that, let's get into some of these quotes. I am going to share each of these 3 quotes, and then I'm going to give you some time in the chat to write down and answer this question. I'm saying what feels inspiring, but you can substitute empowering or affirming or just plain cool about these statements about organizing. So what feels great? What feels awesome and inspiring about these quotes? And to introduce the women I'm going to be quoting here, you see on the upper left, on the top row, on the upper left, you see Kelly Hayes, and on the upper right, you see Miriam Kaba. You're going to read a quote from them in an interview they did together. They are primarily prison abolition organizers, but both of them have national platforms and do a lot of writing and thinking about organizing, but are also just still so embedded in local organizing communities in both Chicago for Kelly and in New York for Miriam. So just inspired and so grateful for them. In the bottom left-hand corner is Ann Braden. If somebody spends more than 5 minutes with me, in particular because my work often focuses on anti-racism, you will hear me talk at length about Ann Braden. She was from Louisville, Kentucky, and between the 1950s and the 1990s, basically was involved in every movement for justice in the Southeast that existed. But in particular, during the Civil Rights Movement, was one of the few people organizing for racial justice in poor white communities in the rural South. And then finally, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a legendary labor active leader, unfortunately, on the losing end with a battle with cancer right now, but Jane McAlevey, who probably has done more for theory and practice in the labor movement, who in particular has revolutionized the work of organizing nurses and healthcare workers than just about anybody else. So we'll be seeing quotes from each of these folks. So I will read the quotes and then put them in the chat and give you guys a chance to reflect on them. So the first quote from Jane McAlevey, our labor organizer. I'm looking for people who genuinely respect ordinary people, because people will see through somebody who doesn't really believe in them in about 5 seconds. I start out every day genuinely believing that people can make radical changes in how they think about and see the world. Well, you get to see that quote more in a second. Next one from Kelly and Marianne. We are not talking about launching search parties to find an undiscovered army of people with already perfected politics. Instead, organizing means finding common ground with a broad spectrum of people, many of whom we would never otherwise interact with. To create movements rather than clubhouses, we need to engage with people with whom we do not fully identify and maybe even dislike. And finally, from Ann Braden, I don't think guilt is a productive emotion. I really don't know anybody who got active because of guilt. Everybody white that I know who got involved in the struggle got into it because they glimpsed a different world to live in. Human beings have always been able to envision something better. I don't know where they get it, but that's what makes us human. That's what makes human beings divine, I think. So what I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I'm going to put each of these into the chat. Actually, I'm not ready to press stop sharing. My apologies. I want to give the instruction. So what we're going to do is I am going to give you 2 minutes in the chat to write your answer to this question. What feels inspiring, empowering, or affirming about these statements about organizing? I'm going to ask you write your answer for the 2 minutes I'm giving you, but do not press send. That way we can all focus just on the writing side first, and then I'll give you a couple minutes to read all our answers after we all press send together. So we are writing for 2 minutes, but we're putting it in the chat, but we are not pressing send on our answers. Does that make sense? Perfect. So if you want to go back to the quotes, I put a link to those quotes in the chat. But in the meantime, we're answering this question. What feels inspiring about these statements about organizing? And I'm putting 2 minutes for us just to type, not press send yet. All right, and I'm going to invite you now to press send. And you see lots of messages coming into the chat. I am going to put 2 minutes on the timer, and we're just going to read in silence, and then we'll have a bit of a full group discussion. As you're reading your peers' answers, just make note, are any of these really just like you're vibing with, you'd love it, or you want to ask questions of somebody? When we come back into the full group discussion, I'm going to be asking, to see if there's any comment you want to pull out from one of your other participants. So 2 minutes to read, and then we'll discuss. I love all of your responses so much, and feeling the energy from them. Did anyone want to say more either about what they wrote, or in particular, if they saw something that somebody else wrote that are like, ooh, that was really great, or hey, I want to ask you about that, or anything like that?
This is Carrie. I connected with what Lindsay wrote. I've been doing a lot of presentations for like indivisible groups that are largely Democrats. They're blue. They consider themselves blue. And the conversation often, they're fighting against the Republicans, and they're fighting against this, the other half of the country somehow. And so I just often find myself articulating that, every healthcare is an everybody issue, and that we can absolutely organize everyone on this issue. It's one of my favorite things about this issue is that it's very unifying. It can be. And I'll tell people, I collected signatures in Cowlitz County. I talked to a person, they signed my petition and then got in a car with a Trump sticker on it. Like, this is the same kinds of things that Laura was talking about organizing in Idaho is Cowlitz County. And people are often genuinely surprised that that's the experience. And it just is everywhere I've been. That's the experience. So appreciate Lindsay's comments for sure.
Yeah. I love that, both Lynn's comment and what you're discovering on the ground, right? And anyone else have something that they either identified with or wanted to draw out?
I think that we're being driven in a lot of ways by the media and other forces to be hateful and to look how we're different and to be angry. And so to have quotes and experiences and people in the background that done this work surrounded by hate is really helpful. Because it gives you, they're people and they care about their families, and they're not the demon. They just are different. They have a different view of the world.
Mm. You know, as you all are talking, I'm thinking a lot about how all of us right now, you know, one of the few things you can get when you go to groups that, you know, like read focus groups with liberals and focus groups with conservatives, the one point of agreement is that everything's messed up, right? We are too divisive. Everyone will agree with that we are social medias. None of it, all of us will say is very, very bad, etc. And it just strikes me, and that we're lonely and isolated, and that we have crises of belonging, and we are bowling alone, and all of these things, right? And it just strikes me that we are all of our neighbors, right? And I say that both, you know, locally and the broader definition of neighbors are very clearly searching left and right for sources of belonging and ways to care for their neighbors, right? And that's both the good news, and you all discover that when you offer, often, not every time, but often when you offer a kind of more expansive way of caring. But that's also the bad news, because it also means that we live in a world in which, in particular, in white spaces, in rural spaces, and conservative spaces, that the means that a lot of people are being offered for belonging, the means that and the story that's being told about what caring for your immediate neighbors means is often a very, very closed-minded one that does not care for all, right? And so, but in that core is a searching for care, is a searching for belonging. And so there's both opportunity in that, and asterisk, because we're about to get to this in a second, it's also probably core to some of the challenge too, that care for being belonging or part of a group can also take people in ways that in not great places. So before we get there, anything else from these comments that somebody wanted to pull out?
I was really, I liked what Lindsay said, that every single person is someone that we can organize. And I think Carrie kind of referred to that also, that everybody is affected by, and most people negatively, by our healthcare system. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm going to move us on because I just hinted at it a little bit, and I want to make sure that this was very cute. This is very beautiful. You all are very good at like following prompts, and I did this prompt that was like, let's all talk. I'm going to give you these quotes that I find inspiring, and I'm going to ask you to also feel they're inspiring. And you very dutifully played along with me, and I'm sure you also believed it, but you're good students. And that's a piece of the puzzle, and I like it, right? And I think it's important. I don't think that it is contradictory. In fact, I think it strengthens our work to also keep top of mind that that challenge of each of these quotes, there's a challenge in them, right? Like the doing it with people you dislike, right? The believing in something divine in people that we don't like. And I love the way you put that piece, right? Like the way the believing perhaps in a possibility from other people that they have not yet believed in right now in themselves, right? And I asked this question in a lot of my trainings, and I debated changing the wording for you all, because a lot of my trainings specifically are about organizing in communities that we know are going to be all white. And obviously, if you guys are organizing whole Washington, you are going to be both organizing in majority white communities and majority indigenous communities and communities of color, et cetera. So I debated taking away the like particularly white people, but I do think that like the line particularly white people points us in a specific mental direction towards communities with a certain amount of privilege, communities that right now are more likely not the only communities that can vote against the common good, but that statistically are more likely to vote against the common good, et cetera, right? We've talked a lot about places in rural Washington. We talked about a lot about Idaho, and we are talking about patterns that in particular show up in white communities. So if that addendum, if the particularly white people is not helpful for you in answering this question, no worries. If it is helpful to you, great. But I mostly want to give a space to do exactly what we did a second ago, which is take 2 minutes and respond to this prompt again. And we'll respond to these quotes again. But instead of responding to them with what's inspiring, we get to say what's hard about this, what sucks about this, why like actually it's more complicated than just these inspiring words that these organizers get to put out to us. So same thing we did before, a couple of minutes to write our answers in the chat. This time we get to talk about what's challenging about this orientation. Again, as you all did excellently a second ago, do not press send until I say go. Does this prompt make sense to folks? Awesome. All right, 2 minutes in the chat. And once again, I'll invite you to press send. Hmm. I'm seeing so many, I'm watching people read and seeing nods as you read, and I'm seeing the thumbs ups and the hearts and things like that start connecting because this feels so real, all of this stuff too. It's all the everything we did in the last section is true. It's inspiring. It's a wonderful thing to be welcomed into. It makes me feel light imagining people like that. And then I think about the actual people I interact with, and I'm like, I'm pissed off, right? So as you all were reading these or writing these, is there anything that really connected with you or that you wanted to expand more about what you said, or perhaps pull out of what somebody else said?
I wanted to respond to Martha's comment.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really interesting because on two separate occasions, when people I know, one partner, one spouse has come up against a seriously financially precarious injury. Like for example, two people have been partners for 20 years. He came down with ALS. They went to a financial coach and they were like, should we get married? And he said, no, actually, in situations like this, people who are married, I advise them to get a divorce because then you don't sink the whole ship. Because if you're married, you go down together, but then you can keep money separate in order to maybe hopefully survive on the other side of it. And I was so mad when I heard that.
It really depends. There are a lot of factors to take into account. So it really depends on people's individual situation. And one thing to realize about financial coaching, it's kind of the Wild West. Anybody on this call could hang out your shingle tomorrow and call yourself a financial coach. And there's a lot of bad advice on social media. Like people get on TikTok and just say complete nonsense.
They seem to have somebody that knew what they were doing because 12 years later, they're still okay. So that's really good to know, Martha. That's really good to know, Martha, because I didn't know that people could just be like, oh yeah, I'm a financial coach.
Yeah, I would ask them like what their background is. Sometimes people are really well-intentioned. They've like dug themselves out of a hole, with debt, and they want to like really help other people, but they may not have a lot of training, both in the financial side and in the coaching side. Anybody who like shames you for, having credit card debt or, makes you feel bad, that person is really not qualified.
Thank you. Thank you for this information.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a fan of people like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman because of the shaming of people that they do.
These are people that have never had to decide between gas or spaghetti when they talk about credit card debt the way they do. Like they're just out of touch, completely out of touch.
My experience is that people who don't have a lot of money are very, very good at being intentional with their spending because they have to.
I think this is fascinating, and we could all do a whole bad financial advice sidebar. No, I just love your expertise, Martha, in particular. But what I'm also picking up more broadly from this conversation too is both, all of everything that people are pulling out here, right? Is I think if I were to name a theme of what I'm reading in this set of comments, it's one thing to say that we put up walls to connection, but it's another thing to see what those walls actually are. And some of those walls are really hard to see because they're so divorced from reality and they so involve a denial of reality. Some of those walls are so hard to see because they are directly threatening to marginalized communities, including to identities that folks on this call share, right? And so it's not just I have one belief system, they have another, right? We have different realms of safety, right? Given with the different walls we put up, and we walk in this world with different levels of safety because, this is not just a theoretical, it's hard to talk across the divide for all of us. There's different stakes, right? And I want to make it very, very clear, like I'm a cis straight white guy. there's no community I can go. There's a lot of communities I can go in where I will hear uncomfortable things that I hate hearing because and that hurt me for people I love. But there's no community I can go into where my physical or emotional safety is actually at risk. And so I want to make very, very clear that like if the message from this is like Garrett's like, if everyone here is not in the most hostile political environment organizing, you are failing. That's not it. I think we both have to push out of our comfort zones. And I love you all pushing yourself in this on who are we talking to? Who are we reaching out to? And the great news is if you all are going to win, you need folks organizing in every community, including communities that are safer for some folks, right? Like trans communities in Washington, we need showing up for this effort, right? So if you have a trans organization, like I actually am not comfortable for my safety in every community out there. That's fair. That's awesome because there's work to do in every community. We need the signatures everywhere, right? And we need mobilized, more committed groups of volunteers in every corner of the state and in every sub-community of the state. So that's the great news, right? And I encourage every group that there is both a pushing of our comfort zones with who we are willing to imagine being partners in this, but also accepting sometimes the gifts of some of our comfort zone messages, right? I also think it's really, really important to pull out, even as we're naming these barriers, and empathy towards, why people fall into these traps of belief systems, right? And here's where I'll reconnect with what you said so wonderfully, Martha, about the financial industry. A lot of people have terrible beliefs about their finances that are hurting them because they're receiving bad advice from influencers, right? And so we should not put all the blame at the end of the spear, right? At the tip of the spear of folks we come, when there's, of course, large systems, both in influencers, media entities, political entities, et cetera, highly invested in keeping people in a messed up place right now. So that's some of what I'm taking from reading all these. And I think that's equally important to pay attention to. And it's equally important to pay attention to all this stuff because this is going to be real barriers to the sustainability of not just your own work, but if you are coordinating and helping and sustaining teams of volunteers, this is going to be true for your group and caring for the needs of a group that sometimes feels inspired, but sometimes feels really demoralized by days that like, oh, we are getting conspiracy theories, we are getting weird attacks, like, et cetera, right? Like Laura told an inspiring story of Reclaim Idaho that's totally true, and the victories have been huge. Every victory has been met with the most vicious counterattack possible. There are some very entrenched groups trying to stop any form of progress. And so I do this section both because I think these feelings are real and they have good evidence behind them that are important to pay attention to, and because they're going to be meaningful, not just for yourselves, but anyone you do this work with, trying to get this goal across the finish line. Is there anything else
Such
in this
a big economic issue for people, because I don't know if you all realize this, but the majority of people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. So for people that do have healthcare, they are a job loss away from, potential medical bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a huge economic issue that a lot of people can find common ground with.
100%. Any from this piece right here, this kind of challenges piece, anything else someone wants to pull out before we move on?
I appreciate a couple people said the assumptions that you make about flags and stickers and, that there's a safety piece in that, of course, but there's also that curiosity, I don't know, that it just doesn't need to be an absolute no, that you don't know until you ask. At least for this healthcare issue, I think you don't know until you ask.
Right. Awesome. So what I want us to do next is take a darn break, because we've been going for a little while, and we're going to keep going for about 45 more minutes. So I think it is 9:13 Central Time, which I'm assuming is 7:13 Pacific Time, unless I'm bad at math. So why don't now it just turned 9:14. So let's be back here at 7:19. Let's take a 5-minute break, and I'll see you soon. All right. I'm going to use my voice as kind of the Pied Piper siren to start coming back, you all. And we are going to go into a home stretch that I think is going to be a lot of fun. And it is basically when I run these kind of mini versions of an organizing session, I try to, I have a decision on how to pare down the piece that a lot of people are most interested in, which is kind of a conversation training, right? Like, how do you actually have a conversation that might move somebody in a different way, move their biases, change, bring them onto an issue that they might otherwise be resistant to, et cetera, right? Obviously, a huge thing that people are really curious about, right? And another thing that is both very simple and very, very hard, right? You know, sorry to keep referencing your story, Laura, but it was so resonant in so many ways. Loved how you're like, you know, once Luke came down and helped like do a little training on this, like it really unlocked a lot of things for folks, right? And but you also named like, and I'll come back to this in a second, that it was really a core key question, like a really, really interesting question that you asked about like they had any neighbors. What was it again? Like,
Did they know anyone who didn't have health insurance, and
yeah.
how did it affect them?
That really unlock the conversation. So there is an art, you know, there's people who spend their entire lives running trainings and going to trainings on how to have organizing conversations. And there's a far longer version of this one that I want to give you all as well. And that perhaps could be useful to just do a couple long sessions on practicing organizing conversations. I would love to do that for you all. But tonight I want to give a teaser. So I'm going to give a little bit of a sense of what the bigger conversation might be, but also giving you kind of a standalone hint that even if you never get that, I think is going to also be really like, is going to give you the basics of what you need. So that's the thing. Hint at a larger world of thinking about organizing conversations while giving you an immediate actionable piece of information right now. So the first thing I want you to know about having an organizing conversation is that I'm always trying to be a little intentional about getting permission for it. And I say like the key to having an organizing conversation is location, 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 which is a bit of a dumb joke, but it's actually a lot of a dumb joke. But by what I mean is that like conversations that are going to be transformative are always better if you're being a little thoughtful about the space you have with another person to have it. And another way of putting it is that I never have a reactive conversation that is about politics with other people. I write publicly online about politics. It's what I do. I do not have debates in the comments. Just today on my Substack, on my newsletter, there was somebody really trying to like get my goat and go at me. And I did the same thing I always do, which is, hey, I can see we see differently about this. My email address is up and above. If you want to set up a time to talk about this, I'd be 100% happy to. It will not be in public. It will not be in front of other people, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And that person may take me up on it. They often don't. It's the same way that, like you, I've got some relatives who love causing trouble on Thanksgiving. And when they do, I say, you know what? If you're just trying to get my goat, cool, you got it. That was funny. If you do want to have a conversation about this, I'd love to set up a time and place to do it. And the reason for this is, you know, like anything, it benefits from informed consent, that like two people saying, we are actually going to have a conversation about this just with each other. We're not going to be performing that conversation for other people. We're not going to have we're going to try to move other distractions away. And obviously the ideal of this, if I could sit down for coffee or sit down for a beer with every single person that I want to have a political conversation with, that would be the ideal. A safe, calm, etc. space. We've both kind of agreed on ground rules. In particular, in the work you all are going to be doing with petitions or have been doing with petitions, that's not always the case. But the mere act of saying, hey, I'm with Pole Washington. Could I talk to you right now about healthcare in the state of Washington? That itself is a mini version of informed consent, because a few things are true in that moment. A, you are letting them know what side of an issue you are on. And that is key. People often think that if you're going to find common ground or meet across the divide, that you have to show a false agnosticism, that you have to be like, oh, I'm open to your ideas on this too. No, not at all. Everyone know we're smart people as human beings, and we're cynical people as human beings. We know everyone's got an agenda. Knowing the other person's agenda on the front end actually makes me trust them more than when I don't, right? So the first thing is, even just saying I'm from whole Washington, I'm trying, we're an effort to get universal health care for the state of Washington. Would love to talk to you about health care. Even that is giving people a sense of where you're coming from. And if they say no to that conversation, on one hand, that's a bummer, right? We want people to say yes to the conversation. On the other hand, it's a gift. Because if they're very clear where you're coming from and they say no to that conversation, they were not in a place to be able to have that conversation. They were not going to be a place where that was going to be a productive use of your time. That doesn't mean that everyone who says yes is going to be a guaranteed yes for what you need them to be, but that does mean that they are saying yes because they're open to a conversation with somebody who's very clearly from a yes in this issue. So I always get permission for a conversation, and I always make sure that it is that they know where I'm coming from the issue, but that they also know that I'm not going to make a pitch. And I needed them to know, because if I don't let them know that I'm not going to make a pitch, they're secretly expecting the pitch. But I say, I just want to, I really do want to ask some questions. Obviously, I have my take on this. If you want to hear my take on it, I'm happy to give it to you. But I really am curious about how you're experiencing this issue, how you're experiencing the debate on it, how you're experiencing discourse on it, how it impacts your life. And I mean that when I say that, right? By the way, as an organizer, each new conversation is crucial for me to understand how more and more of my neighbors are experiencing this issue. That's going to give me greater insight into future conversations. That's going to give me greater insight to strategy. So it's not like I'm faking out. So I want them giving me permission for the conversation, knowing where I'm coming from, but also not being weirded out that I'm going to ask them a lot of questions because they're expecting that. And that can be set up in just a few sentences. Hey, I'm from whole Washington. We're working on healthcare for the whole state. Of course, I'm really passionate about it, but regardless of where you end up landing, I really am just trying to learn more about people's experiences with the healthcare system right now. Wondering if I can ask you a few questions. And even that alone, somebody saying yes to that is pretty clear on what they're saying yes to, and that will already set a conversation up on a different track. So that's the first. I try to have a little intentionality about how I'm setting up a conversation. Was that relatively intuitive, or did anything what I just say there, was it either I was being too muddly and confusing, or you might disagree with it? Yeah, please.
Go ahead, Pam.
Now that I've done this for a while, got a lot of signatures and stuff. At first, I would agree with you that it felt bad, but the next 3 or 4 people would say yes, and it kind of soothed me, I got back from it. So it helped me a lot. And then, but I'd also have a little bit of a whoop. This guy came up to me one time and he said, I'm a conservative and all that, but I have a small business and I really believe in what you're doing. And so that was wow. I said, thank you so much for sharing that. And he signed the petition and everything. So you just kind of, feel it out. But I think as I got a little tougher, maybe, it didn't seem so bad. I did still feel uncomfortable when the people said, I have insurance, I'm fine. Like someone wrote before. Because they could lose their job the next day and they won't be fun. But that's okay, so yeah. Thank you.
No, for sure. I think I saw, Lindsay, I saw your hand. I saw another hand go up, then go down. But let's go to Lindsay, and then if the other hand wants to come back, that's cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought it was kind of interesting, how you said that we should tell them what side we're on, because sometimes I try to, especially being in more of a rural community, maybe don't say as much and, just try to get them talking. But I think that's a really good point and kind of goes back to one of the, Jane's quote about like, people see through you in 5 seconds. So like, if you ask the question, like they're going to know, right, what you're coming at them for. And so it is probably much better to kind of share like what we're working on so that, and then turning it to them like, but I want your perspective. And I really like how you set that up.
I mean, I would be I'm not a great actor. If I were like, you see me, like I go into a Trump rally, like I'd last 5 minutes pretending to be a Trumper before like, like I couldn't fake it. So might as well like, I'm a flaming leftist. Like I'm everything you hate. Let's talk. Like,
I like that.
So Zoe, you were the other hand. Great. You're back.
I'm back. So one of the things that you like one of the things that you were saying is like, it was kind of almost like, I felt like it was almost even a little bit too general because, when I'm walking down the street or I'm somewhere and somebody's like, hey, do you have 5 minutes to talk about animal rights? I'm like, no, because I know as soon as like I say yes, that they're going to go off on some spiel. And it's kind of like, when you have to call for, help on some issue and they got to go through the script, right? And it's just like, okay, just tell me what you want. Do you want money? Do you want to sign a petition? Because then I'll tell you right away if I'm interested in that. And so, so if we're trying to gather these petition signatures, like, because I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah.
I'm coming from being on the other side of it. When the people that have walked straight up to me and said, we're trying to get signatures for a petition to get blah, 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 blah. Would you read and sign this? And then I'll say yes or no, depending on what I know about the issue and how I feel about it. So what is my question? My question is, what is the advantage of one strategy over the other? And is it just depending on the situation that you're in or the location or?
Totally. Yes. Right. Yeah. I think that in particular, if you're talking about a street canvassing, right? Like that you're trying to disrupt someone's flow and get them to talk to you. Right. I do think, and also when you're talking about something where a key element of what you have is a relatively low lift, right? All you need is a petition signature from somebody. I think it's very appropriate to say like, hey, we're getting petition signatures. That's all we need today. But if you're not on board yet, I would still love to talk to you just to ask you questions. I think is great. Like 100%. I think in particular, the question strategy saying like, hey, when I am sitting down with somebody and I'm trying to get a deeper level of engagement with them, because again, I want one thing I want to encourage you all. I think it's one piece of the organizing you all do is getting names in the petition. Another piece of organizing you all need to do is if you're going to, as an outsider to get across the finish line, you're going to need deeper commitment for more people. You're going to need people willing to, who right now are hesitant to start a group in their city and really go gung-ho at it. And understanding people's barriers to doing that, even if they're on board with the issue, is going to be really important. So I think that obviously the let's take time for the questions becomes even more of a necessity when you are going for a deeper level of commitment. But even just for the petition saying, yes, hey, we got a petition for sign. If you're down to sign it, great. Really excited to do it, but also still want to have a long conversation to be down for it, partially because we might need volunteers, partially because I want to know if you're hesitant to sign a petition, what might be, but I want to still learn more about your perspective. Is that helpful, Zoe?
That is helpful.
Awesome.
To take a little bit more of your time, because one of the things that I thought was really interesting is when I saw this come up at like the bottom of one of your articles, I was like, I'm not disengaged, I'm not ill-informed, and how have I never heard of this, especially because I've been in health adjacent.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been healthcare adjacent, and then like now for the last 3 years, I've been like in school, and it's like I talked to some of my other people, like I'm like, did you know this existed? They're like, no, I had no idea. Like from licensed mental health therapists to physical therapists to nursing students to nursing instructors. And I was just shocked that like that it is even well known, let alone trying to people that are for it don't know that it exists, let alone trying to convince people that maybe don't take a vested interest in, bringing healthcare to all of Washington State, or maybe even against it. So it's just like, okay, well, how do we get the people that are already on board to know about this?
Yeah. I'm seeing great hands go up. By the way, I want to name that I love the folks using the hand raising function. If you are not familiar with that function, you can find it just by clicking on reactions at the bottom of your screen. And then you can do all sorts of things, but the hand raising is particularly a useful one. So I'm going to go to Catherine and then Lindsay.
Until they move the hand raising to a different place, which they've done before.
Yeah, every time I've done my just use Zoom like this, I realize, I'm 6 months behind. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. In our defense, I just want to say, we're fighting people who like the system the way it is because it benefits them, a very few very wealthy people, and there's a lot of money. So yeah, there are forces out there trying to hold us down, and we aren't allowed to, are not allowing publications to write about us and put us on the news and that kind of stuff. So, and we also got interrupted by a pandemic. But yes, we need everybody in Washington to say, oh yeah, Washington, I know who they are. That's why we need 4 times as many volunteers.
Yeah. No, I mean, one thing I say in just about every organizing training is I think we should be self-critical, right, of all our efforts and what we need to do next. And we need to remember, and this is in particular when we bemoan, why is the right winning? Why are they better organizers than us and stuff like that? Why is Moms for Liberty doing all this stuff and all the above? Is Newton's laws of motion apply to social change too. Objects at rest stay at rest. And the system as it is, with all of its inequities, with all of its structural barriers, with all the ways it keeps people down, but all the ways it also benefits a certain class of people, is the ultimate object at rest. And what social change is, and it's why I love it, is the attempt to take an object that's not in motion and set in motion in a positive path. And the reactionaries who are going to be against you, both at the grassroots level and the big money level, they don't have to be as good as you all. They don't have to, they don't have to be on their game as much, because all they have to do is keep the object at rest, and your job is to keep it moving. So we should be self-critical. We should also be aware of but with the love and grace of that too. So Lindsay.
Zoe, that was so interesting that you mentioned that you found out about this through Garrett's newsletter, I think is what you were referring to. So I wanted to just take a quick survey because I know a couple people, but I don't know everyone. Can you just raise your physical hand if you heard about this through Whole Washington, if you already knew about the organization? Okay. And then, so Laura, Martha, and Zoe, is this all did you get this from Garret? Is that how you heard about this?
Oh yeah, I never heard about any of this. It was super great to have this tag.
That's great. Well,
Thanks,
I'm
Garret.
so excited to hear this. And maybe if I can ask real quickly, if you guys would be interested, I'd love to add you to our email list, but maybe just message me on the side and I can, depending on whether you want to be added or not, and we can figure that out. But yay.
So I'm going to take Carrie's hand, and then I'm going to go to the next step because I want there's another part of this conversation I want to move us into and give us a chance before we finish. But Carrie, you're up.
I did not realize I put my hand up. I will put it down.
Never mind.
I was attempting to grab a link for folks. I'll put it in the chat to our website.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
I named that hand raising function. It just became so magnetic as soon as I named it. So the next piece of this is the piece that I have a long confounding explanation that we can take 2 sessions on if we want, all the above, but I will then just give you the simple version of it. So once you have permission for a conversation, and again, this is a conversation, this can be a long conversation, a cup of coffee. This is somebody willing to give us time at their door. This is somebody willing to give us time on the street, right? How do I think about these conversations and the goal? I think about these conversations in particular if it's with somebody, if this person's on the street, you're just like, yo, healthcare, hell yeah, boom. That's not a conversation across the divide. That's just a conversation of somebody that I want come to future whole Washington events, hell yeah, right? But if there's a conversation across the divide, someone who's not with us in one way or another, I think this is the most obvious metaphor in the world, but I think of a big old brick wall between me and them. And of course, you're like, I know what the brick wall is. The brick wall is the point of the spear of our disagreement, right? Yes. However, the difference between this brick wall and the one you're imagining is that this is a magical realist brick wall. And we have next to us all of these tools that we think would be effective for taking down a brick wall. We've got a sledgehammer. We've got a dynamite. We've got a wrecking ball, all this stuff, right? But every time we use one of these things on the brick wall, it gets bigger and stronger. And of course, I think you can follow this metaphor. These tools are the rhetorical arguments that we think should convince somebody. They are our facts and figures. They are our articles that we have read that if only they've read too, they'll agree with us. It is our appeal to their humanity. Their neighbors are literally dying and they don't care because they have health care. It is the tone and tenor of our voice, either more plaintive or angrier. None of it works. And that is so freaking frustrating but it doesn't work because of the way our darn brains are wired. We are wired still, as we were when we lived in caves, to sense threats. And an argument against, like, that we know someone's on another side of an issue and they're making stronger and stronger arguments is, even if we agree with those arguments, even if we have some doubts about our stance, the brain interprets this as a threat and goes into some sort of defensive mode, either fight, flight, etc., right? And oftentimes that you'll get somebody coming back almost like giving a stronger version of their opinion than they otherwise have, because that's just what we do when we are like, oh, we're in an argument now. I can be in an argument, damn it, I'll show you, right? So that's the problem with the brick wall, is that the more the stuff we want to do and that we're tempted to do, because darn it, like that stuff we've got in our hands, that sledgehammer, that dynamite, it looks really, really tempting. We want to go back to the brick wall, but it doesn't work. So what do we have instead? We've got the window. And the window, I bet you're like, the window is the common ground. No, the window is not common ground. The window is vulnerability from the other side. The window is them, instead of giving us talking points back, instead of giving us their stump speech on an issue, giving some sense of how they're actually processing the world as it relates to the issue, some sense of story, some sense of like what what walking in this confusing 21st century space looks like for them, in particular vis-a-vis the issue that we're talking about. And in my longer trainings, I focus a lot on how to ask questions that get to cognitive dissonance, that get to the other person admitting that, boy, yeah, there's a sense of what I believe and what I'm all about. And yeah, there is evidence out there that is contrary to that. And I try to, I don't know what to do with that. Once I get to a place of that, in particular in a discussion about power and privilege and stuff like that, I'm getting to a really, really interesting place. So I just tease that I'm often talking about cognitive dissonance in a lot of these trainings. But right now I want to give the simpler version of it, which is to say, what do I do if I'm not allowed to just yell or make my arguments? And it's something that's already been teased in this conversation. I ask a question that, instead of eliciting their argument, is going to elicit a story. I answer a question that I actually am curious about. And by that, I mean, I'm not curious about any person's political arguments. If I'm talking to a Trump voter, I'm not curious about why they say they vote for Trump. If I'm talking for someone on the other side of the abortion issue, I'm pro-choice. I don't actually want to hear why they're anti-choice. Why? Because when we talk about our actual arguments on the issue across the divide, I've said this already, we just give each other our stump speeches. It's like the equivalent of when you sit down next to somebody on an airplane, and you can tell that they're a talker, and they ask you what you do, and you like for a living, and you try to give the most boring possible answer so they'll shut up. It's like that when like we are across the divide, and like we're going to give answers to the what do you believe about this issue designed to shut the other person up, right? And I had like, and so therefore the question, what do you think about the effort to get universal health care for everyone in Washington, is often going to get a really, really boring answer that I'm not actually interested in. So what do we do instead? We ask questions that are going to be more interesting. You know, I talked about Jane McAlevey earlier, and she was this incredible labor organizer, and she in particular did this just like revolutionized how nurses are organized in the United States. And the questions she would ask in all these hospital parking lots during shift change was not, she'd say, I'm Jane McAlevey from the union. I'm trying to organize people for the union. But then she wouldn't ask, what do you think about unions? She'd ask, what do you want to change about your workplace? And that's an interesting story, both because it is a story. You can't tell that, you can't answer that question without going into storytelling mode. And when you tell stories, you're accidentally showing vulnerability. You're accidentally showing like stuff that's going to elicit more stories. If the person asking you the question answers follow-ups and goes again and again and again. The other thing is, though, that also even if that person doesn't join the union, that information about what they change about their workplace gives Jane really, really useful information about that workplace, right? Like, and so it's more context for, you know, in your case, asking people, even who aren't with you, the question that Laura said Reclaim Idaho asked, right? It's like, do you have anyone who's uninsured? Like anyone of your neighbors or any of your family who's uninsured? Do you have anyone in your neighborhood who's sick, right? Like right now, who is struggling with healthcare and scared about their healthcare situation? Hopefully that will elicit stories that bring some vulnerability, that you can ask follow-up questions and builds deeper trust and brings somebody into your work. But even if you don't, even if you end up with somebody who's still not with you, you're learning about what the dynamics of sickness and health and economic precarity look for that particular community. And there's just huge possibility in that. So the first organizing hint I give people, even who've never had an organizing conversation, is if you've gotten a person who's given you permission to ask them questions and you've never done this before, just give yourself permission to ask something interesting. And then after you do that, then that's actually the harder part. And we also will practice this in longer trainings, but the art of, after they give us their first answer to that question, instead of immediately going into your stump speech, but then asking follow-up questions, be like, what was the most vulnerable thing what was the most interesting, vulnerable thing they say? And what do I want to know more about that, right? Like, that's how we build trust. That's how we build both deeper commitment from those who are with us and more likelihood to consider being on our side for those who aren't. So what I want to do, if this is okay, I'd love to finish up today with just a 10-minute exercise, and then I'll do a little closing in small groups, where I'm going to give you 10 minutes, probably 9 minutes actually, to read a scenario. And I'm going to I'm working in the chat right now, excuse me. Going to put it in the chat. I'm going to have you go into the scenario that you'll see just pop up here. And there's actually two of them. So in your small group, when you first get into it, I want you to read both scenarios, both Phil and Tess. But in a second, when the groups are made, I'm going to assign one group Phil and one group Tess. And so read both of them so you're familiar with them. But then once you are discussing just your scenario, I want you to discuss what would be one interesting question you would want to ask to this person. So it's not what they think about the issue. It's not something that would get into a debate or argument, but what would actually be a question that might get a little more vulnerability and a little more sense of who they are and what their hopes are, struggles are, et cetera, for their community. So I'm wondering, Carrie, are you the one who's on the Zoom, or can I make breakout groups? Maybe I can just do it. Oh, I can.
I
Perfect.
think you can, yeah.
I can. I'm making 2 rooms. And room 1 is going to be Catherine L, Martha, Sarah, Carrie, and Zoe. You all are going to be Phil, okay? And room 2 is Diane, Kathy F, Laura, and Pam. You all are going to be Tess. And I'm going to ask that one member of your group be willing to be a writer downer. And the writer downer, if you're taking notes in your own group's chat, you're going to need to copy those notes before your group closes and paste them into the full group chat. Anything you take notes on in the small group is going to disappear. So one way or another, if you are the volunteer note taker for your group, all I need is one question. That's all I need. And one interesting question for either Phil or Tess, but you're ready to put that into the full group chat when we return. Is that okay? Awesome. Let's do 9 minutes, and this will be what we finish on. Awesome.
Hello.
Welcome back, most of this group. And in a magical second, we get all of every group. Hey, folks. And this does not always work, but let's give it a whirl. I'm wondering if the note taker from each group could now paste into the full group chat their at least one interesting question for their person. We got one from Zoe, thank you. For Phil. Oh, that's the first time I've run this, of course, scenario different times. And that's a new question. I haven't seen that one for Phil yet. That's so awesome. Yeah. And I love this. So what I love about both of these, right, is Phil's a very specific story, right? Like that is going to lead towards a very specific set of experiences, right? And those are powerful questions, right? So too are the really open-ended questions, right? Like Tess's question, what's it like working at Amazon? Is we could be wrong, but we're going to anticipate probably that it's going to be so there's going to be so much richness in that we're going to learn, right? And probably often a lot of stories about precarity and about what's tough for Tessa's life, what's tough for Tessa's coworkers' lives, et cetera, right? We don't know yet, but we're asking because we're legitimately interested and we want to know. And here's the key element of both of these that makes us better organizers. Even if I learned a little bit about Phil, even if I learned a little about Tess, I don't know for sure what the details of their answers to this question is going to be. So I'm actually really listening. I'm actually really curious. And this may seem so basic, but we show up better as organizers when we are actually curious than when we aren't. We show up better as partners. We show up better as educators. We show up better as colleagues. Any space, go back to that Jay McAlevey quote. People can tell if you believe in them in about 5 seconds. People can also tell if you're actually interested in them or not in about 5 seconds. So that is a teaser to broader organizing training, but it's also, it really is all there is as well. As I leave you tonight, the last thing I'll hint at, and I'll just do it in a brief moment, is I loved early, Laura gives us an update earlier with Reclaim Idaho, which I had right on this slide, ready to go, is I've got these 4 examples of these groups. And these are all groups that I've had some involvement with. I've gotten to watch throughout the country. Reclaim Idaho is obviously a big statewide canvassing effort, much like yours. But these next 3 groups, there's this group in Minneapolis that I work with a lot called the Southwest Alliance for Equity. There's this group here in Milwaukee in our richest, wealthiest suburb called Whitefish Bay called Bay Bridge. And I'm also really helping this kind of urban mutual aid effort in North Brooklyn called North Brooklyn Mutual Aid. And what they all have in common, they all have different geographies they work at. They have a different element of scale they're working on. What they all have in common is that they were built by somebody who did not have organizing experience, but who cared about either an issue or a community, texted a few friends who cared about it too, and said, let's do something about it. And I think there's a lot of lessons in Reclaim Idaho, especially for the work you all do on petitions. But there's also a lot of lessons for each of these individual groups that are groups of neighbors in a specific place saying, I bet you're craving the opportunity to work on something meaningful and real. Let's work on it. And one of my most powerful first conversations I had with Lindsay and Carrie about this group was what they told me about the whole Washington groups that are really on fire and other specific communities, and they're not necessarily where you might expect, that have had an outsized impact on petitions. And those communities are places where neighbors have gotten together and just texted each other and said, are you feeling hopeless? Do you want to try to get more involved? Here's one effort we can get involved. And so organizing on one hand takes a lot of tenacity. It's complicated in one way. It takes a lot of problem solving when things go wrong, but it really is as simple as well as saying, I am feeling hopeless. I am feeling alone. Those feelings suck. I don't want to feel those feelings. And I bet there's somebody around me who doesn't want to feel them alone as well. And it'd be better to have them working on something with me than just doing it on myself. So I admire this effort. I mean, Lord, everything I can do from afar to help out. I'm just so invested in you all and impressed by what you do and wanting it to win. And it's going to take a whole lot of work, but that work is not complicated. And that is the best and worst news I have for you. It's going to take ordinary people just saying, "Oh, damn it! I guess we're the ones to do this." So, thank you for having me, and I can't wait to keep being in contact and seeing how I can help, and also just cheering you on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Garrett. And I mean, I feel like already you connected us with 4 new friends tonight. So that's awesome. And yeah, it would be great if you guys, join our list. We're always looking for volunteers. And as you seen, we have fun. We have a good time. So, so happy
Can I
that
say
you
a
want
couple
to join.
hopeful things?
Yeah,
Um,
please.
Yes.
So our database has about 18,000 people in it, and I loved Garrett's, some of this is as simple as organizing ourselves, right? It's not the challenging talking to somebody we don't know, we haven't met yet, where they're not on board. It's organizing ourselves. If each of those 18,000 people in our database filled out 1 sheet of signatures, that's 20 signatures, we would have all the 400,000 signatures that we need. So this is a really doable thing. It's also very hard. So yeah, I just really thank folks for showing up today. I tell my kids all the time, showing up is the hardest part. And once you show up, things get a little easier. You get a little more familiar. The work does itself. So thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Garrett.
Take care.